Hey, 7-8 students, maybe some students from our 1-2 who are watching this as a recap. Today we're talking about reviewing and revising so that we can write with power and purpose, stuff we've been talking about through our memoir unit so far. Today's your last day on your first story. Last day on your first story. So tomorrow we're moving on to our second, but don't worry, we will come back to this one later on in the unit. So what are we talking about today? We'll be prepared to take some notes. What I want you to think about today is how can you create one page of notes based on this conversation that you're going to be able to continue to refer back to throughout the rest of the unit. So what I would do is open up to a fresh page, maybe make it landscape, something a little bit different. I want you to think about today's notes differently and uniquely compared to others. This is going to be like a reference page, a go-to page, almost like a table of contents for the rest of the unit, where you can say, what do I need to do to make my writing more powerful and more purposeful? You can go right back to this page. Okay, it's going to be a little bit of a review of the stuff we've talked about up to this point, and it's going to show us how we can revise our writing. So let's get started. The first thing I want you to be paying attention to is how can you lift your writing today? How can you make it better? The biggest question that I continue to ask people is, what does your story say about you? When I read your story, I should find out something about you. It shouldn't just be an interesting or exciting thing that happened to you. I should learn about you through your story. So make sure you're choosing moments that are purposeful, but also understand that you can do this in any story. As long as this is a memory that stands out for you, it stands out for a reason. So let's find that meaning in each of your stories. When I have this conversation with students and the response is, I don't know what you find out about me, usually the first place I go is I point them back to that 16 personalities assessment that we did last week. The results from that tell you a lot about yourself. Do those results say that you are trustworthy? Do those results say that you are good under pressure? Do they say that you are somebody who's like kind of a perfectionist, or somebody who isn't a perfectionist and just like likes things to be done a certain way, but you don't really care if it's perfect? Everybody is very, very different, and so we have to figure out what do the results say about you from that assessment, and then see if the story shows one of those things about you. So earlier today, I had a conversation with somebody, and they said that the results showed that they were very loyal. And I actually read through their results and I immediately thought of a golden retriever, a dog that's very loyal, that just wants to be your best friend. They also had responsibility in there, and I thought of how dogs are protective. And so, not that I was calling this student a dog, of course, but I was saying that they kind of had those attributes. And so, when we looked back at their story, we realized that that's what was missing, is that we didn't actually dig into those attributes that made her unique. The next thing we need to do is upgrade your language. So use that thesaurus.com, thesaurus, thesaurus.com, and upgrade your writing. So go through your story so far and pick maybe like 10 words that you can modify. Look for words that you repeat too often, or words that are just kind of like bland or blah, words where you can exhibit a lot of emotion, but you just haven't so far in your writing. Last thing would be to consider modifying your structure today. Maybe turn one big paragraph into lots of smaller paragraphs. Add a short poem or add some dialogue into the middle of your story. Please continue to modify your structure. Next thing, make sure you're using tools that you have for revision. I would create a checklist based on the notes you have so far. So go through and think, okay, we've learned about using voice. We've learned about using mentor texts and looking for specific language in those texts. So what are the things that we've learned in class so far that you've taken notes on? And can you create a quick checklist and see, have I done this? Have I done that? Have I done that? Use your partners in class today. I am going to have you wait till later on in class to do partner feedback, because I want you to spend time with this first. You know your story better than anybody else, and so I want you to spend time with it first, and then we'll get some partner feedback. Like I said, make sure you're referencing your notes. Think about what we talked about in class, and then have your green books open next to you, and the blue packets as well. Those packets are full of expert writing, and if you're flipping through those, you're going to get ideas as you go. So make sure that is nearby and handy. I should see you flipping through that as you're working. I have a couple new ideas to throw at you today. One of those is using images, pictures to show details. If you look in your green packet, right? Yep, your green packet. In the middle, you'll notice that there's a graphic novel. So it's a very, very different format, different structure, and it shows you different details because it is in images. The author doesn't have to tell you as much, they can show you. And so how can images be that for you? Now, I don't think everybody can do this or could do this well. And so I think, the people who are artistic, the people who can quickly add in some pictures without taking like hours to draw and wasting writing time, those people could include that, but this probably isn't for everybody. And then another thing that might be interesting is to add other genres of writing into your piece. So take a minute and pause your story and say something like, you know what, you probably don't know enough about this topic to really understand what I'm to understand the story. And so teach us about fishing, teach us about a specific aspect of volleyball, and then go back to your story. That'll help to break it up, and it'll make it just a little more unique for your audience. Or consider dropping in an argument. If there's something that frustrates you in your story, maybe step aside from your story and give us a paragraph of like your frustrations and your argument of why you think something should be a certain way. That will really help your voice to come out in a powerful way. And then looking ahead, how will you build off this story for memoir number 2? There will be some people who completely set this one to the side and don't really come back to it later on in the unit. I hope that that's a minority. I hope there aren't too many of you that do. What I would rather have happen is that you use this story and turn it into a bigger compilation of stories. Yesterday in class, we talked about how you might use kind of a flashback story, what I referred to as the How Did I Get Here memoir, where you might tell a present day story, and then you might go all the way back to a really, really early memory and work your way back to the recent memory. So if the recent memory shows that you are trustworthy, maybe back in second grade you showed that you weren't trustworthy, and then you continue to tell stories that demonstrate that you have failed, you've succeeded, and you've eventually gotten to where you are today. So consider that. As I've talked to some students today, they've seen how their idea for this current story is very different than their one for their next story. But they've started to realize that there are actually some connections. Maybe one is about baseball, and it's about how you love being a part of a team in baseball. And then your second story has more to do with a vacation that you took to the mountains. Maybe you're starting to see the thing that's in common is that when you went to the mountains, you loved being part of your family, which is kind of like a team, and how your baseball story and your vacation story are actually more similar. There's a thread that ties them together. We benefit a lot from seeing the connections and the things that have helped develop us and change us over time. Those connections will help you to develop just as a person and also as a writer. And then consider, what are you going to keep or change from this first story in your second one? Are you going to completely discard the way you wrote this one in terms of its structure? Was this one just like kind of a paragraph format? In the next one, you want to be a graphic novel, or you want it to be a poem, or you want it to be full of dialogue, and your current one isn't. So what are things that you're going to keep? What are things you're going to change? All right, so I've given you a lot to take notes on here, and I hope that you are doing these things as I go. So I'm going back through my slides here. I hope that you are answering this question: what does your story say about you, in your notes? I hope that you are creating that checklist in your notes today, that you are referencing some things that mentor texts do. I hope that you are experimenting with, adding in a little bit of an informational writing piece and seeing if that works, or drawing a quick image and seeing if that helps. And I hope that you are actually writing down, what are some things that I want to keep or change? If you're not recording these things, if you're not writing them down on this really powerful page of notes today, then it's not going to be very beneficial for you. So utilize your time today. Before you actually get to your story, spend some time thinking about where you've been and where you're going. Now, once you have done that, I want you to get right to work. Yesterday, we mentioned how this needs to be like a huddle. We say break, and we go right to work. And so I want you guys doing that next. Continue making big revisions for your first story before we move on to your second one tomorrow. So that's what we're doing right now. Making big revisions. Experiment. Try to really mess around with your story. Try to do some unique things today, because when we get into your second story, I'm expecting to see bigger and better things. I'm expecting to see that you have tried out some different things and you're ready to just push forward and get a lot better and show me a lot more in your second story. Don't worry, we will come back to this one. So I've seen some people grumbling, saying, can I just stick with this one and continue to modify it? I am going to have you set it aside and write a second one. And you're going to see after your second one how the two work really well together. So just be patient. We will come back to that first one. I've also seen some people getting really excited about the second story they're going to tell. And so I hope that that's you also. Please let me know if you have any questions today. I should be available via email. So let me know. I'd love to help. So I look forward to seeing what you guys produce today. Get right to work. Be super, super productive. Productivity today looks like a quiet classroom. It looks like partner revisions towards the end, maybe the last 10 or 15 minutes, but independent work the rest of the time. It looks like flipping back through your notes. It looks like flipping back through your memoir writing pieces. The document that you turn in on Friday could be open, but please don't be typing on that document. I should see notebooks that just kind of look messy, to be honest. They look experimental, where you're adding things here in a box, you're writing a paragraph over here to try something out. But generally today should be lots of you guys just trying out different things in your notebook and seeing what works. And I look forward to seeing what you produce. All right, like I said, email me if you have any questions, but I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Enjoy.